Welcome, Dr. Sibanda, to the Fast Company Most Innovative Companies Summit. We are really looking forward to learn from you a lot about innovation in South Africa, but particularly around the Gauteng region, partly because of the book you've written, Nuts and Bolts, which really take us through your journey of taking care of the innovation hub in Gauteng. So the first question that I want to put to you is really about innovation in Gauteng. Tell us about the state of innovation in Gauteng.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Wesley, for having me, on the summit. And it's really, a pleasure to be talking about innovation because, as I say in the book, innovation, not aid, is the answer to growth in Africa. And in particular, in South Africa, as we face a number of problems and challenges, unemployment, inequality, and poverty. And we can only find our answers in innovation. So Gauteng is quite an important region, not only to South Africa, but to Africa. I think from a population point of view, it accounts for 22% of South Africa's population. As a GDP, it's about 34% of South Africa's GDP, and it's the fifth largest economy in Africa. So it is actually very, very, very important. And I think Gauteng has always been visionary, going back to the early 2000s. They realized that they needed to create a smart province. And I think you may recall the Blue IQ then, which was the launching pad for many projects, including the Gautrain, was launched through Blue IQ, and that was the birth of the Innovation Hub. And so innovation has always been important for Gauteng. It houses a lot of academic and research institutes, and therefore, from a patent output, it's also produces the highest number of patents in South Africa in terms of a region. And what we've seen over the years, and if I look, perhaps going back to the early 2000s, has been a growth of the importance of innovation in Gauteng. And whereas most of the activities used to be focused around the innovation hub in Pretoria because of its proximity to the CSIR and the University of Pretoria. It's a growth of an ecosystem, and particularly Johannesburg, becoming also a hub, for innovation. And innovation in Gauteng cuts across from the private sector, academic research institutions. We're seeing them spinning out, companies. If we look just at Wits and Tshimologong precinct, and that is a product of visionaries like Professor Barry Dolowski, whom I was very fortunate to collaborate with. And he foresaw, in essence, a need to almost replicate the ecosystem in Pretoria, in Johannesburg. And through that, we now have Tshimologong, which is doing amazing things. But also there is innovation within the public sector. And we've seen government in Gauteng embracing innovation. And we've seen also the Center for Public Service Innovation focusing on innovation within, government. And again, one reads in terms of the importance of Gauteng, the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation Development, has also published a report on the territorial review of Gauteng, and it highlights innovation as being critical, but also it highlights three challenges to the growth of innovation and also startups, the main critical one being the markets are controlled by large and established businesses.
Interesting. No, that's true. And having read the book, you highlight the role that Innovation Hub has played in harnessing the innovation within townships in Gauteng. You want to take us through that journey of, or at least the role that you played in making sure that there's innovation within our township, particularly in the Gauteng region?
Yeah. So when I got recruited and started in February 2011, my mandate was to reposition the Innovation Hub to focus on innovation. So I didn't really know where to start because this was the first science and technology park that I had ever dealt with. But fortunately for me, I had spent the previous 8 years within the National System of Innovation, having been with the Innovation Fund and also with the Technology Innovation Agency. So we looked at what was the Innovation Hub focusing on. And we repositioned that to then focus on the bioeconomy, the green economy, as well as smart industries. But as time went on, we realized that our efforts were only confined, in essence, to this boundary that everyone saw as the innovation hub. But yet the 2012 innovation strategy for Gauteng said that the innovation hub needed to be repositioned as an innovation agency of the province. And then we started to think long and hard and say, is innovation inclusive the way that we're implementing it? And we realized that it was not inclusive. Why? Because entrepreneurs in the township had difficulty getting to the innovation hub precinct in Pretoria. And we said, well, how can we take innovation to our people? In fact, that became the tagline, taking innovation to the people. And luckily, the city of Tshwane, there was a lady there called Zugisa Ngonyana. She was also thinking the same. And we realized that we did not have money to build another innovation hub in the township. And we said, but how about if we utilize municipality-owned buildings or government-owned buildings in the townships and repurpose them, but put in the exact infrastructure that one would find at the Innovation Hub in Pretoria, and also provide the exact support, mentorship, coaching, and funding wherever it was available. And so that was the birth of Ekasi Lab. And so I was fortunate to have an intern in my office. She talks about that in the book. So she's written a short piece about that. And we started off in Harankuwa, established the first Ekasi Lab as an innovation center in the township. And therefore, entrepreneurs in the township could walk to these centers, alternatively take one taxi and be in a facility where they can be supported. Fast forward, by the time I left in 2018, there were 10 of these Ekasi labs scattered throughout Gauteng. And they were also at that time supporting over 400 entrepreneurs and startups. And I'm pleased, to say that some of them have gone on to create viable jobs and they're sustainable businesses. But I think quite importantly, Wesley, is also, when we reflect on the journey of Ekasi Labs, we also had to think hard and say, what is the future economy and how can we make innovation accessible to the youth in the townships? And so the focus was looking for problems in their own communities and them coming up with solutions. But also we established a software development academy called Code Tribe, to teach young people how to code. And over a 2-year period, we had trained and graduated over 200 young people that got employed, and some started their own startups in software coding, and some of them have gone on to gaming and virtual reality.
Wow, that's amazing. Would you say that Technovera, the developer of Pellebox, is one of your product township type, initiative? Want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so I wouldn't classify him as one of the township ones. I mean, he came in with an interesting, concept. And so what he eventually rolled out and what is being rolled out now for public health in the townships and hospitals for people to collect their medicines is actually a pivot, because his first innovation was for people to collect parcels. And he had a pilot put up at Killarney Mall, but unfortunately that failed, dismally. And then he went on, he had, TB at some point. And so I think from that particular challenge of figuring out how he was getting his own TB medicines, previously, he came up in essence with this pivot. And indeed, he's built, quite a good business. So I mean, there's there's a lady that features in the book as well that does cosmetics, came out of the township. There's also a guy called Martin that has developed amazing speakers. So for sound, music, and these have been featured, globally. He comes out of Ekasileb, Soweto, and so I believe that the townships are, in essence, the hotbed for innovation. And I think it's important for us to redefine what we mean by innovation, and it needs to be all-encompassing. It's about finding solutions, regardless of how big or small the solution is. It doesn't have to be radical, and we need to reward young people for finding solutions and actually innovating, particularly in the township, because that's, in essence, the future of this country.
In the book, you mentioned challenges in the innovation process, if I can put it that way. If you had the power, which hurdle to innovation would you remove and why?
So if I was talking, I mean, if you ask the same question to an entrepreneur, they would tell you funding. But I beg to differ. I think that the biggest hurdle in the system is the one of access to market. In the book, I refer to the regulatory hurdles, particularly the PFMA. And I think we've got to realize that government is a big market. And many of the innovations that young people come up with are innovations that are born out of their own frustration with dealing with government. So it's service delivery, innovations. It's innovations to make government much more efficient. It's innovations to address our education system, and so forth. And what one finds is that it's so difficult for these to be taken up by government. They end up going on tender. And I think that what really is required is almost a preferential procurement provision in the PFMA or the procurement laws that enables government to give contracts to entrepreneurs and innovators that actually they've got innovations that address service delivery. Because that way there is a reference, there is an ability for them to pilot their minimum viable product, and having piloted, then in the next phase, they can be able to compete on tenders, but also quite importantly, they can be able to take some of those innovations out of government and perhaps into the private sector or in other countries. So that is one component that I would, in essence, really move hard to actually deal with. I think if I was given a second one, I'll come back and then say to the entrepreneurs, yes, let's address the funding one. And here, I published a blog a month or two back at Sibanda, Legacy, .Africa, that says that we're not short of funding. I think we just, it's a mismanagement of the funding that we actually have available, and perhaps poor allocation of that funding along the innovation value chain. And therefore, I would then ensure that there's customized funding, small amounts from about 100,000 Rand to about 1 million that are dispersed to entrepreneurs much more easily. So the whole process shouldn't take more than 3 months to reject or approve. And that way allow entrepreneurs to fail fast but learn. I think we are too risk averse, and we need to just reposition, how we work with entrepreneurs.